Welcome to the Strategic Veteran, where we chart the course from service to civilian triumph. I'm Adam Peters, a veteran, entrepreneur, and your fellow navigator in the quest for a life of impact and fulfillment. My mission is simple: to empower you with the tools and stories that turn challenge into opportunity. Having walked the path from active duty to where I stand now, I understand the search for purpose that comes with hanging up the uniform. It's a path I've walked, with its trials, its tribulations, and its victories, and it's a journey we're on together. This podcast is more than just conversation. It's a beacon for those seeking to redefine our missions through entrepreneurship. It's about igniting the entrepreneurial spirit that lives within us, the spirit that compels us to create, lead, and make our mark on the world. Here we connect with veterans who have built businesses, sparked change, and found their purpose in the marketplace of ideas. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've transformed their service into startups, their experiences into enterprises, and they're proof that you can too. So whether you're scribbling business plans on napkins or stepping into the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Ron Jansen. Ron served as a sergeant in Marine Corps Reserves from 2002 to 2008 with 2 deployments, one to Djibouti, Africa, and one to Iraq. And led a counterinsurgency operation in Fallujah. In his post-military career, Ron has successfully transitioned into project management and corporate strategy, applying his leadership experience in the civilian sector, but his journey hasn't been without challenges. Ron shares a story in a memoir that captures his time as a squad leader and his ongoing quest to connect emotionally after years of living disconnected from his own heart. Today, we'll explore Ron's military experiences, his transition to civilian life, and a passion for supporting fellow veterans as they navigate similar paths. Join us as we uncover Ron's incredible story and insights. He's the true embodiment of a strategic veteran dedicated to helping others succeed. Ron, brother, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for sending me that awesome book. I finished it this weekend, and dude, I'm excited to dive into your story.
Yeah, same here. Thanks for having me on, Adam.
Yeah, man. So, dude, everybody, let's start. Where did you grow up, and what inspired you to join the Marines?
Sure. So I grew up in a small town called Dorr, Michigan, which is West Michigan, 20 miles south of Grand Rapids. So I grew up on the country. I remember playing, with some neighborhood kids and my brothers. We would reenact like Vietnam War battles out in the backyard. And we had 5 acres, but we lived amongst in the farmland. So we could kind of had free reign to go wherever we wanted. So that was, I always had an interest in military history and military things. Not really sure why. I don't come from a family with a strong military background. But then as I got older into high school, I considered the Marines as I got to my junior and senior year of high school. But at the time I was playing football, I really enjoyed that. And I had a chance to play in junior college for a couple years after that. So I kind of set that aside. And then it was the catalyst for me joining were the attacks of September 11th. So like I had said, I considered it before and even talked to recruiters, but when that happened, I really just looked at it and said, if I'm going to do it, now's the time. So within a month, I was sworn in and then went on the delayed entry program. So it was the summer of 2002 that I went to basic training and started my time there.
Why the Marine Corps?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it's the only one I considered.
Really?
And I knew if I was going to join the military, I wanted to do infantry. I wanted to do military stuff and not. I have a lot of respect for some of the other specialties that do more technology or support or whatever, because all those are really, very, very important. However, I was drawn to I wanted, if somebody was kicking indoors, I wanted to be that guy instead of on the support side of things. And the Marines are really built around that focus on the infantry and the actual, the people that are out there doing fighting. So I think what drew me to it.
That's what I get from a lot of you guys. A lot of you guys are just attracted to the uniform. It's like it's always the uniform. But at least you went on the right side of things as an 0311. I was also an 11 Bravo infantry, for the man. So Dude, reading your book, really, really interesting that you were just a corporal as a squad leader. So a lot of responsibility put on somebody with not a lot of, I don't want to say experience because I don't know what your experience was, but like seems like a pretty big endeavor to kind of embark on for, truly what would be your first like kinetic combat deployment. What was that like for you?
Sure. It was, yeah, it was challenging, but mostly in a good way. I think by the time we were activated, my reserve unit was activated in 2006. So that was I guess I'd been in the Marines for 4 years. Now, most of that in the reserves and not active duty, other than my first deployment, and had never seen combat or anything close to it. So I really had to rely on. I had our platoon commander, somebody called, or his name was Jeremy Hoffman. He had deployed to Iraq twice already, and so he had a lot of expertise and leadership qualities that I emulated. And then also just we had a decent number of people at our infantry company that had deployed to Iraq before too. Now, all different scenarios. Not all of it was counterinsurgency, which was really its own animal, rather than just the traditional doctrine of fire and maneuver and taking the next hill. But we also had a very good training package that we went through out at Camp Pendleton and then 29 Palms before we left. So it was like 4 months of intense training before we went out. And at that point, I had also in my civilian career started to manage. It was just a small team of 2 or 3 people, but I was at least familiar with being responsible for the work and the output of others. And the Marine Corps really reinforced that you are 100% responsible for what your team or your squad or your platoon does. So I already had some of that. So it was kind of a hybrid mix of my civilian and military experience that got me somewhat prepared for it anyway.
Yeah, so you're learning the leadership dynamics by running your own projects I believe you were doing video security at the time, right?
Yes, yep, yeah. We installed like security and access control systems.
So managing your own team and your own project there gives you a little idea of managing 12 other guys when you get overseas. So that's awesome. I was really interested while I was reading the book because as an active duty guy, your whole life is just training. You're always training.
Sure.
So before you go on a deployment, and I always I had the pleasure of my second deployment. I think we fell under the Marine Corps, so I was with every MEF that you guys had, and your deployments were way shorter. I ended up being there for 16 months, so I rotated through all of them.
Yeah,
as you guys would come through. I didn't realize that. Is that a reserves thing that you go to 29 Palms for 4 months before you ship out, or is that just kind of what your unit had to do?
Yeah, no, I think that was the same package they were putting most of the active duty units through as well. And it was about 3 months at Camp Pendleton where we were going through, live fire ranges, training, different scenarios. And then the last month was at 29 Palms in a package they called Mojave Viper, which was kind of a combined exercise or combined arms, but then also they had a lot of like very realistic scenarios where you would be patrolling through a village and then, you'd have to interact with some actors who were pretended to be locals or whatever, or you might start taking fire or a bomb, an IED goes off. So I think that was pretty standard, even for active duty units that would go through, they would be training full time up to that point, but then they would go through a similar buildup before deploying over there.
Yeah. It's just always interesting to see how the different branches do different training to prepare for kind of the same mission. Because, like I said, ours would start with team and squad sticks, then you go to platoon and company sticks. Then you would end up doing a JRTC or NTC rotation, and then by the Army standard, you're qualified to deploy.
Sure.
So it's always interesting to see how, because I feel like for you, the way you describe it in the book is you are very much at Pendleton and 29 Palms, pretty much locked down. So it's really the deployment stateside before you go overseas on the deployment.
Yeah. It felt like we were back to being it. So School of Infantry is what Marines go to after they get out of boot camp, and you're basically on lockdown. You might get a weekend or two off, but that's what it felt like. I mean, I could probably count on one hand the number of times we had weekend liberty while we were doing it. It was pretty intense the time that we were there.
I love it, man. So share with us how leading your squad in the counterinsurgency operations kind of shaped you and built you into some of the person that you are today. Because there's a lot of lessons in that book, man. There's a lot of lessons that you touch on in the book.
Yeah, I think one of the things that even as I was writing it, I hadn't considered much, but as I was reflecting back on it, is really just each of the guys. You take 12 or 13 guys in a squad. Each of them is going to come, even though you've all had the same training and everything. You're all, everybody comes from very different backgrounds, very different life experience, different talents, and that sort of thing, and it just felt natural to play off of those strengths. So that, we had one fire team that had a couple of guys that were really good at searching. So that's what they did. And another one that, our scribe, he learned Arabic pretty fluently, and he was a Mexican-American. He already spoke Spanish. He spoke English better than I did. But he, so he became our kind of our interface between us and the locals and even some of the Iraqi troops and everything. So it was those sorts of things where just learning that each person has unique talents and abilities, and you can try to fit them into a box as much as you need to. And you think, in the military, everything's standard and uniform and everything, but that's not the case. I mean, you've seen it too, I'm sure, where everybody still has their own strengths. And I think I had team leaders that played off of that. And then also we did as a squad. We all kind of saw it. And it ended up, I think, made us much more effective as a squad than if we would have just said, everybody does the same thing across the board regardless.
Yeah, I picked up on a lot of that in the book. I like where you talk about, particularly you guys were out on that cot all by yourselves away from the flagpole, and you really talk hard about the dynamics in the book, about what it was like for you to have, we're going to really a less safe place and a place that's going to cause us all more stress if we let it. However, you looked at it as a kind of a way to let your hair down. And I remember, that was my favorite thing. I did 4 deployments. So I did 3 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. And my favorites were when we were all the way out at the edge of the AO by ourselves as a platoon or a company. And we didn't have to be by the flagpole. We knew nobody of any significant rank was going to come bother us because I have feelings on that. So probably a lot of the similar feelings that you have. And how those dynamics change, 1, with you as a leader, but 2, within your men. And it's just really cool that you actually, I don't know how you remember everything that went on that long ago.
Sure.
Because I'm reading that and I'm like, fuck, dude, I did a lot of similar shit like this, but I couldn't write it nearly in as much detail as you did. So I think it's awesome that you picked up on that, you held on to it, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I mean, back to what you said about just being farther away and appreciating that. It was, it wasn't just. I mean, there's some, there's always some Mickey Mouse shit you have to deal with when you're not even in garrison, but on a platoon size forward operating base. But we did really just appreciate, hey, this is us. We're out here together as a team, and we just need to worry about what's most important right now. And that's the mission and keeping each other safe, but nothing else really matters. So other than that, do what you want. So that was great. But also that I've had that conversation with several people. So guys I deployed with or others about what I remember versus what they remember. And it's really interesting because, I only wrote about what I remembered, obviously, because I wouldn't have included it or couldn't have if I didn't. But there are other things that they'll bring up that I have zero recollection of that, have stuck with them. And that's been really interesting, too. It's almost like you need to combine all those things to have some sort of view of what it was, because we each have our own unique perspective on it. And, some of the things I remember well, other guys have no recollection of, and it goes the other way as well.
Yeah, dude, I relate to that so hard because I guess it would have been late last year, early this year, I reconnected with a buddy of mine who was on the first 2 deployments with me. We hadn't seen each other in well over a decade. And, he's telling stories, you remember this time here at this location? I remember the location, but I don't remember doing that. Like, I did
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but you did that. And I'm like, no, come on. Like, no, I didn't. And it's like, it's really interesting, like, to see, like, we all have very much our own perspectives of what's going on, the way we remember, particular events from deployments. And I think it's really cool to be able to sit and piece some of that stuff together. I'm sure it was pretty cathartic for you to even sit down and write the book, to get a lot of that out of your brain as well. I'm not a big writer, so, like, for me, it's just like that. I did so many for so many months, like 50 months deployed. Like, they all run together. You know what I mean? And then it's like, well, now I'm an asshole because I'm going to get this out of order. I'm going to misspeak or whatever. So
yeah, well, first of all, I would encourage you, because I'm not a writer either. So it was just something that, it was 3.5 years ago or so. I just really felt a prompt to say, hey, I feel like I want to start writing about this. And it happened like in an afternoon. It wasn't anything I had thought about. But to your point, it was really, I recognized it, after a few months, like it was me processing the events, and that it was. And I also had that same fear of, hey, I'm not sure if I'm getting this right, or if this happened before this, or whatever it was. And I sent it to, so I ended up, sending some of it to the guys in my squad or other people I knew. And actually a few people said, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what, if we did this before that, or if it was the other way around. It's more the overall storyline, and I didn't want to let myself off the hook. So I went back to, like, I kept a journal sporadically during the deployment, but what was most helpful was just going back to, like, old photos, because most digital images have a date and a timestamp on it. So you can look at it and just say, at that exact moment, that's what I was looking at, or that's what we were experiencing. Which really helped out, kind of lay out the timeline a little bit more. But it's interesting. Have you ever read The Things They Carry by Tim O'Brien? I mean, that I've just actually started reading it again recently, because I'm going to be going on a retreat through Patrol Base Abate, where that's going to be our study book for it. But that whole book is kind of around the, what we remember and how we remember it, and how we process those memories. And, he's kind of in that, it's like mostly true, and his experiences, but not all of it. Like, some of it he embellishes, or it's, and he's open and honest about that. Like, it's kind of based on understanding memory. And some people use that. I've seen it, or I've read a few memoirs where some people use that as a cop out, where they just start making things up, and say, well, most of it's true. That was not my intention at all. Like, I want it to be true to the heart of the things that happened and how I experienced it. But also, talking with some of the people about it gave me the license to say, okay, it doesn't have to be, it's not a diary. It's, it's a recording of my experiences, and I'm going to be off on some things.
I think that's awesome, man. I never thought about approaching it from looking at old photos, mainly because, my early deployments were very much before digital photography.
Sure. Yeah. No, my first one was too. Yeah. Yep.
So it's really hard. Like, and then also, for whatever reason, I didn't like being in pictures, right? So there are not, I mean, very few and far between photos of me from those early deployments. For whatever reason that might be, I don't know, maybe disposable cameras got blown up somewhere here or there, or whatever. But that's an awesome way to go about it. And I didn't think anything, at least to me, knowing pretty much all of Iraq, because I was there so much, like, nothing sounded like you embellished at all in that, right? Like, you were very open and upfront. One of the most frustrating things, and I know this was frustrating for you, like, early in the deployment, you would go get in these little skirmishes or these ticks, and then leadership would pull you back. It's too dangerous. And you're just like, what the fuck are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, so I'm sure that probably happened a lot more than you actually allude to in the book, because it happened to us. That was one of the beauties of doing 4 deployments from 2004 to 2012 is I watched the ROE change from, first deployment, anybody on a cell phone, anybody out after curfew, no questions, or anybody on a motorcycle. I don't really understand the motorcycle thing at the time, but just no questions asked, like just dead. Right. To then fast forward 8-9 years later in Afghanistan, you basically have to wait for them to be shooting at you before you can even, send a warning shot downrange.
Right,
Like,
right.
this is awful, man. Like, what are we doing? So that's awesome, man. Let's talk about anything stand out from your time in the Marines that you carry with you to this day that kind of help make you who you are.
I think it is a lot of those just leadership lessons, and also seeing. I mean, I think I was very fortunate and unique in the sense that I had a great platoon commander, and our company commander, guy named Dan Wisnat, was incredible. And so they did a great job of keeping our focus, the entire 7 months we were there operating, like keeping our focus on what was important. And what was important was like getting the Iraqi people to, to side with us, because they knew, in counterinsurgency, unless the locals support you, you've lost. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And at that point in the evolution of the mission, that was the most important thing. So I think that made a big difference for me, and that's had a lasting impact on me as I lead, but also as I seek out leaders and people, whether it's in, at work or with other organizations or whatever it is, to really focus on that, because I think it makes a tremendous difference. And I mean, I fall short of that all the time, but I really think about it. It really is crucial. Those people that you report to, the few notches above you, makes a huge difference in really all parts of your life.
Yeah, dude, one of my favorite parts of your book was the witty banter between you and some of the leaders. That was like, that is straight up Marine Corps. Like, that is textbook Marine Corps, particularly with those assholes. I forget what you call them. They look like strikers, but they're really shitty compared to strikers.
The Amtrak.
The Amtrak. The first group that came to pick you up, and they were just like, they were pissed at you guys, and it's like, are you fucking man? And I was thinking, because I was a Bradley guy for a little bit, and then I finished on strikers, and things are very different. At least appear different in the Army infantry, kind of mechanized infantry world from what you guys were talking to Marines. It sounds like your vehicle crews are completely separate entities from the rest of the infantry squad.
So they were definitely, the Amtraks were. I think there's light armor reconnaissance, which are the I can't think. Well, LAVs which are similar to the strikers, and those I think are more integrated. But Amtraks are you could sort of look at them like Uber drivers. They get you to where you're going to go, and then peace out. So if they didn't have anywhere to, or if you didn't ask them to take you somewhere, they didn't have to go anywhere. That was the key, I think. That and it's not fair. I mean, I throw quite a bit at the Amtrakers, the ones that we experienced there. But then I do write, there is some redemption later on. There was a crew that we ended up with that were totally cool with us. So can't say it was all of them, but most that I experienced.
It's just funny to me, because like when we're on Bradleys or when you're on strikers, your squad leader is the vehicle commander. So if anybody shit's getting thrown out of the striker so that you could go to sleep, it's the squad leader, and then usually the team leaders that'll be sleeping in the striker and everybody's sleeping outside. I'd have been pissed if they'd have thrown my shit out. I'd have been so damn mad. But I just thought it was funny, because I've experienced that too. Tankers and infantry guys don't get along, and we would do a lot of joint stuff with the tankers, and they would throw our shit everywhere. Just like and obviously there's no room for an infantry squad in a tank, but oftentimes we would try to sleep on top of the tank or something like that to stay warm, and they just weren't having it. So I relate to all that stuff, man. It brought back some pretty good memories. So
heaven forbid they carry a few batteries for you or something.
I know, right? Like, come on.
And it's funny, because I think, as I was writing it too, I was like, well, maybe it's infantry, because we're feuding with everybody. We don't we don't like the air wingers, the Amtraks, whatever. But that's just kind of how it is.
I think we're bitter because by and large we're doing. I know this is going to sound egotistical, but we're doing the most work. We're doing the most work. You know what I mean? Like, you Amtrak guys, you Air Wing guys, you get to go back to your really nice fucking beds at night, and we're sleeping here right here in sector on the ground, cold. Was it your book? I think it was your book I was reading where you guys left your baby covers at home so you get wet in the sleeping bags, and then now you're
Right.
just
Yeah.
freaking cold, and it's like, well, what's the point of having a sleeping bag at this point? That kind of
Yeah.
shit. Dude, I'm really interested because I talked to obviously a lot of people on this show. The vast majority of them active duty, and the reservists and the guard guys, they don't seem to have quite the same problems in transition that the active duty guys do. And I think that's for a lot of reasons, right? Because by and large, a lot of you are working regular civilian jobs that gets put on pause to go do these deployments and your drill weekends and all of that. So I'm curious, what did you experience in the transition? First, like, what made you decide, assume you got out of the reserves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what was the decision for that?
Sure. So I got out, we returned in April or May of 2007. And I think I had about a year left on my 6-year reserve contract. And so I ran that out. By then, we had just, I think by April of 2008, we had our first child. So that was part of the equation. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for people who continue to deploy even with a family and kids, but that was looking difficult. And also, there wasn't really another deployment on the schedule. And in the reserves, if there isn't a deployment to work up towards, it's not the most exciting lifestyle. You're doing weekend training and in the woods somewhere, kind of playing war at times, it feels like. So I think it was the right time for me to get out. I mean, I considered the options, but that transition, I think the heavier transition was not when I got out of the reserves. It was when I returned from Iraq. And then, it was, I think there's a couple different ways, like several guys in my squad and a lot of guys in our company, you get 30 days of terminal leave, upon returning. You can use that 30 days and then really you can go on unemployment. There's nobody that's going to stop you. You can just say, hey, I don't have a job. And some guys, took an early retirement for a while where they just kind of chilled, and I don't hold anything against them for doing that. But I was kind of the opposite, where I think in order to keep myself from really dealing with any of the experiences or some of the experiences, I was like, I got to get back into work. So I was going to take those 30 days and just chill and hang out. And like day 2, I called my boss and said, hey, I want to come back to work. Like I'm done sitting around. And I think there was some positive aspects because I did, get right back into working, had something of purpose anyway. But also I think there's some things that I wasn't willing to really confront. And just coming out of it, I just jumped right back into the next thing. And, you mentioned that difference between active duty and reserves. I mean, if you think about it, I had the whole time I was gone for a 12-month period. So basically we started our workup. We're gone for about 4 months, then 7 months in Iraq and a month on the back end, kind of doing out processing. You active duty guys did that 3 or 4 times in a 4-year period, or active duty Marines. And then, active duty Army in 4 years, you might've done 2 16-month deployments. Like that's an incredibly intense experience for an incredibly long time. And then add to that a lot of those guys came right out of high school. So you graduate and then you graduate and then you jump into training and then are in this active deployment. So I think, one of the things that I've come to understand or think is that it's when it comes to intense experiences, traumatic experiences, whatever they are, you need time to metabolize that and kind of process it. And I'm 15 years out of it, still doing that. That's part of what writing is and all that sort of stuff and talking with guys like you. But holy cow, you have a shit ton more to metabolize than I do, even because you did this, for years on end, and for longer periods of time. And that just, sometimes it's just a numbers game, I think. And we're all made up differently, but that's a lot of stuff to process over a long time.
I love that you touch on that because in the book, you talk about coming home and your refusal to you're like, I'm not going to let any of this affect me. Basically, just I'm going to put on the appearance on the outside and I'm going to forget about what's going on the inside. And then shortly after you get home, you realize, well, this really isn't working. I'm antsy. None of this is really for me. So let me call my boss and go back to work like immediately, right? And as I'm reading that, I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good, because that is the absolute wrong way to go about it. Because, like you just said, you need the time to actually sit with the emotions and process all of that stuff. And that's by and large what we do is all of us come back and we refuse to deal with that, particularly like what you were just saying. And I spent 12 and a half years, every other year I was gone. So it was leave the first time, come home, have orders on the parade field when you get home for the next one. Same situation between the second and third. Oh, by the way, the second one got extended an extra 4 months. Come back from patrol one day, look at the memos all over the chow hall or whatever, saying, hey, congratulations, you're going to be here for the clock just reset, basically. You're at a year before you're going home. Then you come back, you jump right into training again. So all the work up to get ready to go again. In my case, I had orders to go to Alaska after the second one. They're like, oh, no, guess what? We're going to delete those. We're going to send you to NTC and immediately send you back on the third one to Iraq. And you're like, Jesus Christ, dude, like, can I breathe? So right, for me, I wouldn't have time to process any of that until the med board came down and it's time to get out. And then it's like, oh, shit, like, here it all is. You know what I mean? So what were some of the most difficult things that really led up to, finding out about the catalyst that started what I would call your healing journey? Like, what were you dealing with? What were you finding so hard about this? What were you avoiding that you just wanted to bury yourself in work? And basically, I think you were probably looking for action, just busy stuff, right? Because you were so busy over there. And I know Fallujah was a hot spot, when you were over there. I get the timelines on the battles of Fallujah confused, but I'm fairly certain one of the big battles was raging over there pretty much while you were there, right?
Yeah, no, it was, the two big battles in Fallujah were 2004. So that the first one was April, where they kind of pushed into the city, got pulled out for political reasons. And then November of 2004 was like the big, the all out brawl where they cleared the city. So while we were there in 2000, late 2006 to 2007, the insurgency had kind of rebuilt itself and it was more of a simmering, movement from contact to contact wherever you went, but not the major intense stuff. But to go back to what you were saying about just what was I think your question is, what was I running from? And I think that's the right way of phrasing it. I think one of the things that I've realized now that I didn't then is, like, in order to operate in combat and actually, do what you need to do and actually do well, you have to really separate your mind and your heart. I think that's maybe the best way of putting it. Like, you just I became very logical. Like, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to do it. And I wasn't completely disconnected. I mean, there was times I connected with the guys or with other things, but for the most part, it was like, this is what has to happen. And that allowed me to not really, deal with anything that was going on inside of me, but also inside of other people as well. And when I returned, I think I just kind of continued to reinforce that. Like, I just need to do the right things in the right order and move forward. And yeah, a lot of it was just distraction from that. Like, I found ways to distract myself, and in all or most of them in, relatively what would you consider healthy ways. Like, I jumped into, my job, church. I started going back to school because I had my associate's degree by then, but eventually over many years got my bachelor's degree. Family, kids, like I said, and all those, for the most part were good things. But they were all kind of keeping me from really connecting the dots on, what I had experienced. And also, it wasn't even just the combat experience. I'd been living my life that way the whole, my entire life. So it was a lot of things that I was just trying to push forward rather than kind of taking a break and stopping and dealing with any of it.
Yeah. And then we get to the big event that kind of pushes, right, the catalyst for the healing to really begin. And for those that want to know what that event was, they can read your book. We'll leave it at that. And I think through that event, you start going to therapy, right? And I think that's probably where the can of worms started getting open and you started to realize, oh, well, I've got some shit that's got to be dealt with. Am I pretty spot on with that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I remember one of the things I write about is so it was basically got to a point where our marriage was in shambles. I mean, it was and in everything that I had tried to kind of hold up and say, yes, I have it figured together. Figured out. We have it together. Everything, like all that was just shattered. So I got to the point where even though I really couldn't even try to pretend like things were okay or that I had it figured out. And so, my wife and I were in counseling, started seeing individual counselors. And one of the things that they kept going back to is asking me questions about, my time in Iraq or my time in the Marines and how that connection is like, there's no connection. That doesn't freaking matter. Like, this is a problem with my wife here that I'm dealing with. And it did start to, I started to think about it, and the things that I was experiencing were it was almost like I was experiencing as if I were still in combat. Like I was experiencing that way. It was like, hey, a bomb just went off, or like this happened. Now I need to react, and I don't know what to do because I don't know who to fight and who to. And it became clear like all those things were connected in ways that I had not wanted to really understand. And so that was really the turning point for me, but it took me getting to a point of just I realized I couldn't control it and I couldn't do it on my own. I had to give it up. But that was actually a very freeing moment for me.
And I like that you just touched what you just touched on with the reacting to something in your life. That is the trigger. And that's what the Marine Corps taught you how to do to survive in combat, right? It's the difference between fixed and growth mindset. It is very much one mission, one job, for one branch, and you do that to the best of your ability. And that means overriding and ignoring your natural fight or flight response to go react to, it's called react to contact for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. And instead, what you needed to do and what the military as a whole doesn't teach us how to do. I used to refer to this as like, they're really good at teaching you how to flip the light switch on, but when the lights go off, they don't teach you how to deal with that. And
sure, right.
What I mean by that is instead of reacting to those situations without thinking them through, you need to sit with that for a second, process it, and understand how to not have an emotional reaction, but to have a logical reaction to it based on processing the feelings that are going through your body at that time. And that's what we're not equipped to do at all whatsoever. And so did you start learning that through, because the therapy sessions that you talk about in the book were really interesting, and I would have really struggled to answer those questions to someone, particularly, I imagine you probably didn't have a counselor that had any kind of combat experience that could relate to you. So that's by and large why I never sought therapy out. And to this day, I've really only talked to a couple of therapists attached to some veteran retreats, and that's it. And there's definitely an element there of, yeah, maybe they haven't lived it, but they haven't this approach to it where they understand, if that makes sense. And so what was that like?
Sure. Yeah. And I think what you're alluding to in the book, yeah, that was a woman who had zero combat or like, not experience talking to people who've been in combat or in combat herself. But and I think I remember at the time, like, why am I saying all these things? I don't really trust that this is going in the right way. But it was just like at that point, it was just kind of coming out. I've also found a lot of my healing and growth there has been also on retreats. Like I've done several of those through. It was a counselor I was seeing at the time, and he does like 4-day wilderness retreats. And I've gotten to know him pretty well, and I help lead some of those now. But those have been really instrumental for me and understanding. I think one of the things that's tough with veterans is like people don't understand, but they can understand a lot of it. So a lot of the experience is universal. They don't understand everything, but like I think sometimes we cut them out entirely. What I've found, like even on some of those retreats, getting to know some of the guys haven't experienced the same things as me, but they still struggle with things. They still hit some of the same issues. A lot of the same issues are universal. But then also just processing it with other people who aren't formal counselors, but like yourself or other, guys in my squad and others where we just have been able to talk through some of the things. And, Yeah, I think I've had the same journey. I've found, the VA. I did go to the VA. That was not too long after we got back. I was struggling, and they're I've found them pretty quick to hand you some pills and say, "Here, take these. You'll feel better." And if you want us to start writing up your paperwork for disability, we'll do that. And I have no problem with people going through that process, but it's more of a heart thing than it is a chemical imbalance in a lot of cases. And that's what I needed to process. So it was not. Not just trying to dull it with. You can go a lot of routes with that. You can go, drugs, alcohol, medications, whatever. They're all sort of the same thing. And if I look back at it now, my drug of choice at the time was just performance. Like keep moving, keep moving in one direction, so you don't have to deal with what was going on behind you.
Well, I think that's an important point to make. Is your drug of choice was performance, just not healthy performance, right?
Sure, right.
Like,
Yeah.
because there's a distinct line between that, and my drug of choice was like you, retreats. I knew I had the privilege to watch those come before me go get on all those pills and become zombies, and oh, by the way, still try to kill themselves. You know what I mean? Like, the VA is really good at putting band-aids on things. They're not good at like really diving in and healing things. And then, for me, it was Heroic Hearts Project with the plant medicine journey that really changed everything. Followed up not too long after, about 6 months after, with the Operation Red Wings Foundation retreat, which, hindsight being 2020, I should have gone to that one first and then probably to Heroic Hearts. That's not how it panned out. But learned some really valuable skills there, particularly in the ORWF one. That one really reinforced what I had learned and what people had been teaching, at the Heroic Hearts, plant medicine retreat. And I'm constantly looking for more. I have this problem now where it's like, by and large, I have the tools and I've done quite a bit of work on myself. So I feel like I'm taking a spot from somebody else who needs it. However, part of what came from the ORWF one was I need to let those feelings go, because maybe the universe has a way of putting me in those retreats to be a sounding board for somebody else or an example for somebody else as to how you can heal. And so I think that's really cool about those retreats. But you mentioned in the book you went to a retreat, and that experience was really profound, in the same way that my experience with ayahuasca was extremely profound for me. So talk about that retreat and what you actually saw on that retreat that I really think probably kind of demonstrates that you had made it to the other side of the healing journey, and now you're really well on your way to living a better life and being honestly a mindful and a present life. I think is really what came of that retreat for you. Would you agree?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it was several things for that. One is I kind of put that in there. I had a pretty bad attitude about going on it. I didn't really want to, and yeah, uh, I had these images of sitting around a fire with a guy and a guitar, and talking about feelings. I was like, that's not really what I'm what I'm into. And this was 4 or 5 years after I had really started my journey, so it wasn't like it was the first time, but I was still pretty resistant. But one of the things that was really great that came out of that was just the community aspect. It was 12 or 13. I mean, it was basically the size of a squad of guys that went out to the woods for the weekend, and it was 12 or 13 guys that I got to know really well. And they shared very openly and vulnerably about what they've struggled with and issues in their lives, divorces, losing jobs, whatever it was. And that kind of set the stage for me to do the same and share some of my struggles where I wasn't really prepared to do that. But then also there were these times of solitude that you get sent out to the woods for a couple hours just to really be out there, be in nature. And I kind of struggled because these guys came back with when they were sharing later that night about some of the experiences they had, and I didn't have much of an epiphany out there. I was just kind of thinking, well, maybe I can make something up. I don't know, but I didn't. I just said, hey, I didn't see much, but they actually started asking questions. Well, what did you see? And that started later that night. It led me to this kind of vision of me as a father, and I get choked up every time I think about it, but me as a father and how much I love my kids and how much I know my own father loves me, though he's not perfect and I'm not perfect. And it was really, really powerful. And it kind of came away from that just in a different in a different mindset about who I am and my identity. And it's been great. And like I said, I've been on quite a few of those, and I can relate to what you said about like going on future retreats, because if I'm not helping lead, I'm like, well, I don't know if I really, I feel like I should have had this figured out right now. I don't need to do more. But I signed up for that one through Padrone Base Abade, which is a nonprofit that does these sorts of, I think a little bit different track, but they do retreats for veterans out, and they've got a place out in Montana. And I wrestled with that a little bit, but I'm not by any means fully fixed either. Like I think I still there's more growth for me, and and I hope I can. I'm excited to be there with the other people, but I'm also not going into it assuming I have all the answers. Like I'm going for my own purposes and because I need it, and I think we all need it, and continue to. I don't think any of it's like a one time and everything's great. Like we need to continue these conversations and deal with the next layer of stuff that we haven't been dealing with because all the other stuff was going on.
Well, and that's just it, right? So you mentioned that you went out of the woods, you really didn't have that epiphany, and it was through conversation that you get to your epiphany, which is the whole point of everything I'm trying to build. It's like, none of us do this alone, period, end of story.
Right.
And our biggest detriment is ourselves to ourselves by thinking that we can do it alone. And then, you mentioned it twice in that answer to the question was the conversation. Conversation is so powerful. It's so powerful for coming to these realizations, to understanding what you're actually capable of, and just by having others around you just like that. And it's by and large why I don't have any qualms with signing up for retreats when I can find the time to go on them, is because I know A, I don't have everything figured out. B, the conversation that's going to come from those experiences is going to be enough to teach me some more things that I don't already know. And I think, I, like you, when I went on the Heroic Hearts retreat, I was very, very closed-minded. And I to the point where I had to promise myself, the only promise I made to myself is I would participate in everything and I would try my best to keep my mind open, right? Because when you start talking about plant medicine, and all the things and the modalities that go into making an effective plant medicine experience kind of a really truly healing experience, all the shit seems woo-woo. It's very woo-woo. It's meditation, it's mindfulness, it's breath work, it's yoga. It's all the things I think you'll agree as infantrymen, combat infantrymen at that, we all turn our noses up at, like, this is bullshit, that's fucking crazy, that's hippie, I don't want anything to do with this. And so by doing that and keeping my mind open, it's like it changed my whole life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that work in a group, that's something that's been really unique or interesting to me as well. I'm also involved in a few things. One thing is called Base Camp, where we just share. It's men sharing their stories once a month, and their faith and their failure and redemption. And one of the things that the leader of that talks about, or the guy who founded it, is like, we journey together or we die alone. Like that's kind of the mantra. And that's, so if you think about, our time in the military, you're never alone. To your own detriment. You want to be alone sometimes, but you're not. And you never go on a mission alone. I mean, even the highest level top tier operators, they operate as a team. Like nobody goes alone, but then we assume that once we're out, we should do this alone and we should just be on our own and figure it out. And it just doesn't make sense.
It's so funny that you're touching on it, because I just got the pleasure and privilege to interview Tom Spooner for this show, ex Delta Force guy. And he said the exact same thing. He runs Warriors Heart, and he's like, even at the level that I was operating at, yes, we have some special mission units that do some singleton stuff, but by and large, you're always with somebody else. You're never alone. And it's like, man, if you start to look at it like that, probably, I think that's even more powerful, because one of the biggest things that we do when we go to get out or start our transition is we hang on to the identity that is the military. And I think there's some very, very valuable things in there, right? Like you were never alone, that we kind of miss, the forest through the trees kind of situation there, right? Like we're hung up on this identity that was the Army. We can't move past it. and we're refusing to see the things that we can take with it, and that is working with other people. And I'm with you. I started this endeavor building the personal brand as like, I'm going to be a coach, and then quickly discovered one-on-one coaching is really hard, and it's hard to scale and everything else. But I also started to look at my experiences. And 4 weeks of integration before the ayahuasca journey, and like 6 weeks afterwards, most of it is group. Not a lot of it is one-on-one. You do have one-on-one stuff, and I learned so much more from the group, because what I think happens is, there's in every group there's that one person that will open up before anyone else will. You sit silent for a little bit, and then somebody will open up, and then the floodgates open for everybody else. And I've been that guy at times, and I've also been the guy that sits there quiet and goes last at times, right? But that's so beneficial, because really it lets you know you're not alone. And you can't get that in one-on-one, right? Like every time I share what I've been going through in a group setting, people are like, "Oh, you experienced the same thing that I experienced." May not look the same, but it's very much the same type of experience and feelings and emotions that you're dealing with. And I think that's important for people to really like latch onto. Like, get out of your own way, find a group, and go talk about the shit that's bothering you, because I promise you they're going through the same damn thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's awesome, man. Dude, so what are you up to these days? You're a project manager now. You do a lot with corporate strategy. What's the future looking like for Mr. Jansen here?
Yeah, well, great question. Yes, I work for a company called Spartan Nash. We're a regional grocery distributor. We also supply to commissaries, military commissaries all around the world. So if you ever bought groceries at a military commissary, chances are we were part of the operation that got it there. There's a lot of exciting things. I mean, you could look at the grocery industry and say, okay, that's not changing much. Not a lot of excitement there, but there are. I mean, there's consolidation, there's different technologies, and the truth is, people will always need groceries. They're always going to want the things that they eat at home, and so we're really focused on what are the ways we can continue to get things there, to do our core business well, but then also look at the other opportunities out there. So I feel like right now my job is a good mix of strategy, but also then execution, which I enjoy, because you see it all the way from the idea all down to actually making it happen. I'm going to do this as long as they let me, I think.
Yeah, the grocery industry might be changing a whole lot quicker than we all think if they strike.
Oh, sure.
Oh, God.
That's
a terrible situation.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, what did you...
I said the grocery industry might be changing a lot quicker than we all think, with the looming strikes at the ports coming tomorrow, right? Like, that's a whole nother situation. Like,
yeah, that's there's different supply chain shocks that come in, and a lot of them you don't typically hear about. But like with eggs in the last year, like the prices were way up because there were a couple of different factors. There was bird flu and a couple other things, but we're constantly dealing with the next thing, and the port thing. I know, especially for like overseas commissaries and things like that, hopefully aren't impacted. But those things you don't think about until after the fact. You start to run into some of those.
Any plans to write another book?
Not necessarily to write another book, and I've always had this kind of thought in mind that that you never write a second book, because usually people's second books are not great because they used all their good writing on the first one. And I don't think that's entirely true, but that's just how I've remembered it. But I think I found out that I really enjoy the process of writing through this. And I've never considered myself a writer. I mean, I didn't do it other than what I was forced to do in high school or college. But I do like there's a creative element, even writing a memoir, there's a creative element of how you tell things that I've just found really interesting. So I am writing more now, whether it's just some things that I write, whether it's short stories or just things I write because I want to, I don't know. And whether it's another book someday, I'm not sure, but I'm going to continue writing. I guess I could say that.
Hell yeah. Dude, what is one thing you want everybody who's listening to this to take away from our conversation today?
I think that we're not alone. I mean, a big part of it is I operated like I was alone for a long time. Even when I was a squad leader with 13 other guys around me, I at a lot of times operated like I was alone. And that's not life. We all have people that we rely on and need to rely on, and be okay with that. And we also need that. I mean, part of that is like, we need that. And also that puts responsibility on us to be there for other people, whether that's our friends, our families, people we served with, whatever it is. And I think, so you asked one thing, I'm going to say two things.
That's good. Yeah.
One of the things I've wrestled with over the last 15 years is, what do I do with my, what do I do with this? And I haven't had a good answer, but I think I've more clearly recently seen, especially from people reaching out who I served with or who have read the book and, served maybe somewhere else, but had some of the same thoughts. Just the concept, like, our service doesn't continue, or I'm sorry, our service does continue. It doesn't end once we get out. And I think that's a big part. Like, you are part of a bigger organization. And one of the things that veterans struggle with, I think, is you lose that when you get out, or it feels like you lose it. But I think there are opportunities and options to continue that through things like we said, like the retreats, and it can be community-based stuff too. It doesn't necessarily be immediate or military focused, but things like what you're doing, bringing veterans together to share their stories, all those things are really important. And for whatever reason, I didn't see that for a long time. I'm starting to see it more now, and I want to continue that.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is exactly what you should be doing with all of this. Is I could see a world in which you're standing on stages talking about the book and some of the lessons you learned in the book, speaking to people, which would then kind of push your book forward and be able to sell more copies and all that good stuff. It's just sharing. It's sharing our stories, man. And I'm finding more and more every day. I just got a really cool message when I released last week's episode. Like, hey, I listened to your thing. I've never talked to this person in my life. I like your voice. I like your approach to things. And boom, right over to signing up to join the community. I'm like, this is really cool. Like I'm creating value, and moreover, I'm creating a place for all of us to not have to make the same mistakes that like you and I made, right? Like, where we close ourselves off and we retreat from that, we pour ourselves into something else to avoid opening Pandora's box, which is already open. We just refuse to admit it,
Right.
and then, drugs, drinking, suicide, all that becomes a big factor. So that's what you do with it, man. Tell everybody how they can get in touch with you if they want to just reach out, talk to you, get advice from you. Let them know where they can find you, my man.
Sure. So I have a moderate social media presence. LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. I'm a bit of a corporate nerd like that. So you'll find me on LinkedIn. Or I do have, Facebook and Instagram. You won't see a lot of stuff from me, but I'm on there. So yeah, send me a message, whatever you want to do. I'd love to.
Yeah. And where can they buy the book?
Amazon is the primary. So, you can get it on Amazon. And it's pretty good setup. They basically print on demand. So, if you order it, a print copy of it, they'll print it off and you'll have it in a few days. So they move pretty quick with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to go out and read the book, get a little insight into what he was dealing with on his deployment, and a lot of insight into the challenges he faced when he came home and how he overcame them. Ron, man, I really appreciate you being here, brother. Thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for talking to me. Thanks for telling your story, man, because these are important. And whether you know it or not, whether I know it or not, somewhere somebody's going to watch this and it's going to save their life just because we had a conversation. And I know that to be fact at this point. So I just appreciate you. Everybody, please don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. Help get this in front of as many veterans as possible. It's super important, and we can save lives by just changing the narrative that's out there. So please do that for us. And again, I give you Mr. Ron Jansen.
All right. Thanks a lot, Adam. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, man. We'll see everybody next week. Take care.
That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.